Breaking developments are emerging tonight from the Middle East, and what has unfolded in the last 12 hours has changed the trajectory of this war in ways that analysts are still trying to fully understand. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is claiming it struck over 100 military targets inside Israel in a single night, and this retaliation came less than 24 hours after Israeli warplanes eliminated the man who had been running Iran's entire war strategy since this conflict began on February 28. But here is the critical question nobody in the mainstream press is asking clearly enough tonight. 100 claimed targets and only 2 confirmed deaths on Israeli soil. That is not a minor discrepancy. That gap is the entire story. Is this Iran's most devastating military strike yet? Or is this the most sophisticated propaganda operation of this entire war? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what Iran is doing tonight, why they are doing it, and what it means for the next 48 hours in the most dangerous region on Earth right now. The conflict driving tonight's crisis is direct and unambiguous. Israel versus Iran, 2 states locked in open military confrontation since the end of February. Each escalation answered with a harder blow, each assassination triggering a larger missile wave, each wave pushing both sides closer to a threshold that no leader in the region has clearly defined. And tonight that cycle has reached a point where information warfare and real military action have become almost impossible to separate from each other. Here's what we know with absolute certainty. Early Tuesday night, Israeli warplanes conducted a precision strike inside Iranian territory, and they killed Ali Larijani. He was the head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. A senior Basij commander named Gul Reza Soleimani was killed alongside him in the same strike. Iran's own government confirmed both deaths within hours. There is no room for ambiguity here. No room for denial. Larijani is dead, and Tehran acknowledged it publicly to the world. But to understand why this single strike sent shockwaves through the entire strategic picture of this war, you need to understand who Ali Larijani actually was inside the Iranian system. He was not a ceremonial figure sitting behind a desk. He was not a bureaucrat processing paperwork. When Supreme Leader Khomeini was killed on February 28, when Israel and the United States launched their joint operation, and the Islamic Republic lost the man who had led it since 1989, Larijani stepped directly into that vacuum. He became the operational brain of Iran's war effort, the coordinator of missile strikes, the manager of proxy networks stretching from Hezbollah in Lebanon to militias in Iraq to the Houthis in Yemen, the person making the strategic decisions that determined how Iran fought back against the most powerful military coalition in the region. Israel did not just kill an official Tuesday night, they surgically removed the architect of Iran's entire military campaign at its most critical moment, and Iran had absolutely no choice but to respond publicly and visibly. Less than 12 hours after Larijani's death was confirmed to the world, Iranian state media published a dramatic announcement. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claimed they fired missiles at over 100 military and security targets in the heart of Israeli territory. Semi-official Fars news agency amplified the claim within minutes. Within hours, the number 100 was circulating across every major global news outlet. Broadcasters from London to Tokyo ran with it, and Iran had achieved the first objective of this operation. The narrative was in the world before any independent verification could complicate it. But here is what every serious analyst noticed immediately after that announcement dropped. Iran said 100 targets struck. Israel has not confirmed 100 hits. No independent satellite imagery has surfaced showing 100 destroyed military installations across Israeli territory. No emergency declarations from the Israeli government reflect the kind of catastrophic damage that 100 simultaneous military strikes would produce on the ground. And the only confirmed casualties on Israeli soil are 2 people, a man and a woman, killed in Ramat Gan, a city right next to Tel Aviv, struck by shrapnel from incoming Iranian projectiles, to deaths. Some shrapnel recovered from streets across central Israel, and a claim of 100 military targets destroyed in a single night. So what is actually happening here? Let me show you what the verified facts on the ground tell us, because the evidence is very clear if you look at it without the filter of either side's official statements. Wednesday morning, Israeli emergency services confirmed that 2 people died in Ramat Gan after being struck by incoming shrapnel. Dozens more were treated for injuries at local hospitals. Missile fragments were found across multiple neighborhoods in central Israel. Air raid sirens had sounded across the entire country through the night. Israeli hospitals had already moved patients into reinforced underground facilities as a precaution before the first missiles arrived. So we know with certainty that Iran fired a large number of projectiles, and we know that some of those projectiles penetrated Israeli air defenses and reached populated areas. But to confirmed deaths and scattered shrapnel do not match 100 simultaneous strikes on military bases, command centers, weapons depots, and strategic installations. The math simply does not work. If Iran had genuinely struck 100 military sites in a single coordinated attack, you would expect very specific things to follow. Massive fires visible from commercial satellite imagery, secondary explosions as ammunition storage facilities ignited from secondary heat, confirmed military casualties announced by the Israeli Defense Forces, emergency declarations affecting military operations across the country, bases evacuating non-essential personnel. None of that has emerged in the hours since the claimed strike. And in the age of smartphones, open-source satellite intelligence, and real-time social media, destruction on that scale does not stay hidden. It leaks through footage. It appears in commercial satellite passes. It shows up in social media posts from the surrounding areas. Tonight, it has not appeared anywhere. So what did Iran actually hit? And why is Tehran claiming 100 targets when the evidence does not support that number? The answer comes down to how Iran is counting. And understanding that reveals the information warfare strategy at the core of tonight's announcement. Analysts believe Iran likely fired well over 100 missiles and drones at Israel in this coordinated wave. And they are counting every missile that was launched as a target engaged. Not every site that was successfully destroyed on the ground. If the IRGC fired 130 projectiles, and 85 were intercepted by Iron Dome and Arrow defense systems before reaching Israeli soil, Tehran can still claim 100 targets were engaged without technically lying within their own accounting framework. This is information warfare executed with discipline and purpose. Conflate the claimed success publicly and immediately. Control the domestic narrative inside Iran, where the population needs to see visible strength. After losing their most senior war commander in a single Israeli airstrike, make the response appear overwhelming and decisive, even when the actual physical damage on the ground remains limited and contained. But here is where the analysis must be completely honest, because there is one element of tonight's attack that cannot be dismissed as pure propaganda, and Israel cannot deny it, because 2 people are already confirmed dead, and the type of weapon Iran chose to deploy changes the military equation in ways that go far beyond the headline numbers being reported tonight. Multiple independent reports confirm that Iran deployed cluster munitions in this missile wave. And cluster munitions are not simply a more powerful version of a standard ballistic missile. They represent a fundamentally different and far more complex problem for air defense systems. A cluster munition carries multiple separate warheads packed inside a single outer casing. Those warheads detach and separate during the terminal phase of flight. One incoming missile becomes 5, 8, or even 10 independent projectiles, each following its own trajectory toward the target area below. Israel's Iron Dome system is engineered to identify and intercept individual incoming threats. When a single missile fractures mid-flight into 10 separate warheads, the system must simultaneously track and engage all 10 of them. That burns through interceptor missiles at a rate that no air defense architecture was designed to sustain across a prolonged conflict with multiple large-scale attacks. Iran chose cluster munitions deliberately, specifically to exploit that structural limitation in Israeli point defense systems. They studied how Iron Dome operates. They analyzed its radar tracking frequencies and its engagement timelines. They identified precisely where the system struggles under saturation pressure, and they built tonight's attack around those specific vulnerabilities. And the approach worked. At least partially. Something got through the defenses. 2 people died in Ramat Gan. Their families are grieving tonight, while military planners in Tel Aviv and senior officials in Washington run calculations on what happens if Iran launches another wave twice. This size using the same cluster munition approach against a defense network that is already burning through interceptors faster than it can be resupplied. Now let me show you what Israel is actually doing in response. Because Israel's actions tonight reveal far more than any official statement. Benjamin Netanyahu's government has said nothing publicly about the 100 targets claim. That silence is not confusion. It is a deliberate strategic calculation made at the highest levels of the Israeli government. If Israeli officials publicly confirm significant military damage, Tehran immediately claims a propaganda victory that echoes across the Arab world and reinforces the narrative Iran needs its domestic audience to believe. If they deny any meaningful damage entirely, uncomfortable questions immediately arise about why 2 civilians are confirmed dead and why missile fragments are being recovered from streets in central Israel. So the government is staying quiet on the numbers, but they are absolutely not staying quiet on military action. Over 200 Iranian sites have been struck by Israeli Air Force jets in the 72 hours leading directly into tonight's missile wave. 2 Israeli strikes for every 1 missile Iran fires. Netanyahu is not waiting for diplomacy to produce results. He is operating on the clear assumption that sustained, overwhelming military pressure will eventually break Tehran's operational capacity to continue this fight. In Washington, Donald Trump has stated publicly that this war will end soon, but nothing in the intelligence picture emerging tonight supports that assessment. Reports suggest Trump's own national security team is seriously divided on the path forward. One camp is pushing urgently for a ceasefire framework before the conflict expands beyond any realistic ability to manage diplomatically. Another camp is arguing strongly for allowing the military campaign to continue until Iran's missile stockpile is degraded to the point where another major conflict becomes operationally impossible for years. And analysts across Western capitals are quietly acknowledging that. Larijani's removal has made near-term diplomacy significantly harder, not easier. Because Tehran is navigating a dangerous leadership transition at precisely the worst possible strategic moment. No clear decision-maker at the top. multiple factions competing for authority inside the IRGC and the political establishment simultaneously, and hardline commanders pushing for maximum visible retaliation regardless of the long-term strategic cost. Could this internal power struggle produce an even larger and more dangerous Iranian strike in the next 48 hours? That is the question no intelligence agency in Washington, London, or Tel Aviv can answer with confidence tonight. And there is a dimension to this crisis that mainstream coverage is almost completely overlooking. The Gulf states cannot escape this conflict no matter how carefully their governments craft their public statements. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, and Bahrain have all been forced to activate their air defense networks with every major Iranian missile wave since this war began. Reports indicate the UAE alone has intercepted nearly 2,000 Iranian drones and missiles over the past 16 days. 2,000 separate intercepts. Each Patriot missile interceptor costs over $4 million. Each DOT interceptor costs $13 million. The mathematics of sustained air defense at this operational tempo are simply not sustainable for any extended period. Someone's magazine eventually runs empty, and when that moment arrives, the next Iranian wave does not get intercepted. It reaches its target. And the political consequences for governments that have been quietly hosting American forces while trying to publicly stay neutral become completely unmanageable. For the tanker crews navigating the Persian Gulf right now, this is no longer something they follow in the news during their downtime. It is the question of whether their vessel survives the next 12 hours. Commercial shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has dropped sharply as major carriers either reroute their vessels all the way around the Cape of Good Hope or anchor outside the strait waiting for conditions to stabilize enough to transit safely. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 21 million barrels of oil flow every single day. Energy that powers factories across Germany, that heats homes across South Korea, that fuels entire transport networks from Mumbai to Los Angeles to Sao Paulo. Multiple tankers have already been struck or damaged near the strait in recent days. War risk insurance premiums have reached levels that make certain voyages economically impossible to justify for shipping companies. Brent crude is trading above $105 per barrel tonight. And if Iran formally closes the strait entirely, 20% of the world's entire daily oil supply disappears from global markets overnight. Prices spike toward $150, possibly $200 per barrel. Airlines begin grounding flights because jet fuel becomes unaffordable at operational scale. Manufacturing slows across multiple continents simultaneously. Inflation surges across economies that have no alternative supply source ready to fill a gap of that magnitude on short notice. And here is the supply problem that almost no major outlet is discussing seriously tonight. The United States is running dangerously low on the interceptor weapons it needs to simultaneously support Israel, protect Gulf partners, and cover its own forces deployed across the region. Patriot and DAD interceptors require significant manufacturing lead time to produce. The consumption rate across Israel, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and American forces already positioned in the theater is exceeding Washington's realistic capacity to replenish those stocks at current operational tempo. At some point very soon, the choice becomes impossible to avoid. Prioritize interceptor resupply to Israel, or maintain Gulf partner air defense capabilities, or keep sufficient stocks for American forces who are themselves operating under direct and demonstrated Iranian missile threat. There are not enough weapons to fully satisfy all three requirements at the same time. That is not a political statement. That is a supply chain reality that Pentagon planners are reportedly already modeling in detail. And when that moment arrives, the next large Iranian missile wave does not get intercepted. It reaches its targets, and the entire strategic picture shifts in ways that no amount of additional weapons shipments can quickly reverse. The next 48 to 72 hours represent the most consequential window this war has produced since it began. The leadership vacuum in Tehran created by Larijani's death is being filled right now, in real time, behind closed doors. Someone is sitting in those rooms tonight making the decision whether to escalate further or allow this retaliation to stand as sufficient for now. If IRGC hardliners gain the upper hand in that internal struggle, the next Iranian missile wave will be larger, more sophisticated in its design, and more deliberately engineered to saturate Israeli defenses that are already stretched. If more strategically calculating voices assert control, there may be a pause, not peace, but a temporary operational halt designed to reload stockpiles, rebuild the damaged command structure, and buy time to assess what Israel has actually destroyed in 3 weeks of sustained strikes. What we know with certainty tonight is this: Ali Larijani is dead. Israel removed him in a single precision strike and Tehran confirmed it. Less than 12 hours later, the IRGC claimed 100 military targets struck inside Israel. Only 2 people are confirmed dead on Israeli soil. The gap between that claim and the verified damage is enormous and tells you everything you need to know about what Iran is actually doing tonight. Iran used cluster munitions, specifically designed to overwhelm Iron Dome, and some warheads got through, which proves the threat is entirely real even if the claimed scale is heavily exaggerated. Israel is answering with 2 strikes for every 1 Iran fires. Gulf air defense networks are burning through interceptors faster than Washington can replace them. Oil is above $105 per barrel, and the Strait of Hormuz remains at genuine and immediate risk of closure. Neither side is backing down. Neither side is sending any credible signal that the political calculation has shifted towards serious negotiation. And somewhere in the fractured command structure of post-Larijani Tehran, the decisions being made right now will determine whether the next 48 hours bring a temporary pause or a catastrophic escalation that the entire region is not prepared to absorb. What happens in this window will not simply decide the next phase of the Israel-Iran war. It may determine whether what began as a targeted strike on Iranian leadership 3 weeks ago has now set in motion a chain of events that no leader in Washington, no prime minister in Jerusalem, and no commander in Tehran can fully stop anymore.